Hello and welcome to Too Old for This Shite, a podcast where we're just us old people talking about shite. By old people, I mean people in their 20s.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yes. Definitely not in their 40s. What do you think people in their 40s? I hate them.
I think they're super cool. Yes.
No, it's just that Kevin Malone bit in The Office where it's like, what do you think of old people? I hate them.
I despise them.
But we've been away for a few weeks because I had horrific hay fever and the shits at the same time.
It's sneezing out your arse.
Yeah, so we're back. Finally got to see Sinners, which is what the podcast is mainly about today. We're not going to be doing a big preamble because even though this is a preamble, but finally saw it. Ryan Coogler's film, or Coogler's film. He's the guy probably best known for directing Black Panther.
Not the Pink Panther.
No, the Black Panther.
Oh, okay.
But it's a period drama set just after World War One in the south of America. Not like fucking Latin America, as in kind of like down...
The Deep South.
Deep South. About a bunch of people fighting against vampires, really. Yeah. I don't know what way to describe... Look, there's been loads of podcasts and loads of videos about it. Obviously, we liked it. This isn't going to be a review thing. This is going to be... I hate using certain titles for certain things. They're kind of clickbaity. But I think the only way that I can title this podcast is like Irish people's view or opinion on Sinners. Because I think, and you think, probably that it was like a great movie. And I think as with most great movies, it kind of... or works of art, it kind of starts off a conversation about it or kind of gets your... Yes. Brain going a bit more. Like I think definitely with the historical context with it all, from African Americans' point of view, with the stuff that happened to them with it kind of raises a lot of topics that I think are worthy of discussion. And as well, it's just like, it's an amazing film. I think probably we talk about the film a little bit before we get into it, like what we liked about it. So what did you like about it?
Well, I quite liked the way it did kind of transition from one thing into entirely a different thing while still being the original thing, and that sounds a bit cryptic, but it kind of started off like not your stereotypical, but it was like back in the days when, racism was rampant and white people ruled, sort of the Deep South, and black people are still very much marginalised and treated as slaves and, basically plantation, that whole thing. And it started off with these guys who had done good in Chicago, basically came back with a bit of money after stealing it from Irish American gangsters and Italian American gangsters. And they were trying to do something, I suppose, back in their home community. So it starts off like this, I don't know, kind of like just one of those kind of films who are kind of examining that whole kind of time period in time, the culture and all the rest.
And like we're saying, it's set just after World War One, exactly, so you have this whole thing that seems to happen with Vietnam. I think when we were growing up, there was a lot of, in the 80s, there was a lot of like Vietnam movies that were covering a similar topic about people coming home from Vietnam, thinking that they'd be treated like heroes and just being like...
treated like dirt,
and like with the promise of this kind of like, you'll be heroes, we'll treat you like equal. So say you had like predominantly, I suppose, a lot of people that were in the Vietnam War were African Americans. And like they were out fighting for the country. They came back probably with the hope of some form of equality, and they were just like fucking treated like garbage if they came back at all. But then if they came back, sure, the mental scars from that shit and more. But like this is dealing with World War One, so in the context of a lot of these guys, they're probably taught, oh hey, look, maybe we'll be treated like equals if we go off fighting. And well, I'd imagine they probably didn't have a choice in the matter. They're probably drafted up and just fucking sent off, like, but they come back and they're just treated like shit again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, I suppose it's they kind of thought that, well, I'll move to the bigger city and as well I'll kind of do better down there, but then they kind of realise, well, do you know what, actually I got to get back to our home place and back to our families and stuff like that, where people know us and they actually treat us with respect.
Another thing of a lie being sold to them, because at the time a lot of I have to mention, like, a lot of the stuff that I know about the historical context of Sinners is looking at videos by a guy called Teflon TV. So I don't want to be like fucking regurgitating this guy's hard work without giving him a bit of credit. for it, but
Well,
it's...
don't regurgitate then.
Yeah, well, they're not regurgitating, but it's just like a lot of the stuff that we got, because went off looking up videos about Sinners afterwards, and this guy's stuff came up, and the context of it is amazing. He's probably one of the first, one of the few times I've seen people talking about like what actually happened with the Irish famine and like Irish
Poor,
people's
not
experience,
Irish.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
and about Irish people as being indentured slaves and stuff. But we'll get into that kind of like going along.
But it's basically this, what you think is like a historical kind of, very interesting, and a lot of musicality in it as well, and a lot of familial relationships, and then suddenly it turns in, it's almost like
Dust Till Dawn.
exactly, it's almost like it's a titty twister, and suddenly all these vampires
Yeah.
come in and fucking absolutely fuck up the place.
But it's like, it's the twist. I don't think it even, if for it to be a good film, even on its own, right, it doesn't need the vampires in it. But like the whole kind of thing, like as with most kind of like great bits of art, like people can have their own interpretations to it. But it does seem to be fairly clear that like the vampires are meant to represent like colonialism, or kind of like people exploiting black culture, or what's the word that they go, the appropriation.
Yeah.
Kind of, whereas I think it should be clear that it's not like just about people taking kind of thing, like, say it's in the context, say black and white kind of relations. It's not like, say, a white rapper, like there's nothing wrong with people doing that, but it's like if people are exploiting it or trying to make it like Elvis, like where they robbed like a lot of the blues, and like literally robbed blues songs, never paid like I think Hound Dog, I don't know, like maybe it was, there was a woman who had a hit with it, I can't remember her name, and Elvis did his work, and they just, so it was like Elvis's song. So like that woman, I don't know, it was like an old blues song that, like with a lot of blues songs, they weren't really owned. It was like people would just play them,
Yeah, there were folk songs and such, I suppose, really.
But it was like
in a
the same thing. It was like
context.
the record industry just exploiting kind of like black people. That like all of these people's songs, they would have been recorded, but they would never seen a fucking penny from it. They would have been sent out on tour. It's the same stuff still goes on today, like, with everyone in the music industry. But I think that's like, say, the face value thing that you can get from looking at Sinners, where it's like the vampire is there because he's drawn to Sammy. Is it Sammy is the main character? He's like, with his music, that it can bring around their ancestors, but it can also bring around the evil willing to exploit it, and the vampire is there to suck away his powers and kind of like draw in his powers and exploit it for his own kind of benefit. So like, in the face value, that's like the face value is it's a vampire movie and a gangster movie, cool kind of period piece. But there's a lot more even underneath that when you get into the historical elements, which this Teflon TV guy did, which some of the stuff like being Irish we would have been aware of, but not being American, African American, we wouldn't have been aware of that history. Because it's not really, we're taught about the civil rights movement in school, but we're not taught in depth about it, because like there's like so much focus on
European
and Irish kind of revolutionary history, and because like Ireland basically had like nearly 800 years of repression by the English with it, and it does have, like, I think one of the things that I feel with it, sometimes you try and be like, oh, leave all that shit in the past, or like, no, don't carry hatred, but you kind of can't at the same point. There is certain things where like it is in our kind of, it's in every Irish person, Scottish person, probably Welsh persons, and definitely French and other things, because the British colonised a lot of fucking things, so you're still a bit like, fuck the English, like we lived over there, and like, I hate to say, but there is still racism. You kind of say, oh well, not everyone is like it, but there's still a lot of racism there, and like things thrown at the Irish, where it's like, oh, you stupid bastards, he died because you couldn't eat potatoes.
Yeah, and it's like, learn what happened exactly.
Yeah, and it's like, no, you're kind of like just covering up this part of your history, because your people don't want to think of all the fucking horrible things that she actually did to us, and what she did to other, and because of ye, fucking America's in the state that it's in fucking as well, and like Israel was formed by fucking the English that wanted to cause disruption out in the Middle East.
Yeah, this is starting to sound a bit like an English hate podcast.
It's not, but it's just about acknowledging these things as well at the same point, which a lot of people don't, especially over this side of the world, because we are so keen to kind of put it behind us nearly,
exactly,
and kind of move on from it. Whereas it's good to, but there's still a lot of these bad people out there, bad actors out there, as you see, like with Trump and all that.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is great about this, like Sinners, is that it does raise a lot of these when you look into the context of it. So you look at it and you go, this is a great fucking movie. This is really entertaining. There's some amazing shots, like what you were saying, the music.
Yeah, there was like one scene in particular I thought was absolutely phenomenal. We should probably go in the fucking Congressional Library or whatever, is like, you know, this fantastic piece of cinema and music history. There's a lot of documentaries have tried to summarise the link or the trace down of sort of, say, black music and folk music, traditional music in general, right up to the current day. And this literally just had a 10-second almost like kind of an interlude, whereas they had traditional African music, the current music of the time, which is the blues and all of that kind of stuff, and then the future music, which is all hip hop and rock and roll in general. It just summarised it perfectly.
It was a bit jarring because it was
you weren't expecting it.
Yeah, and it's just a fucking the spectacle of it is, and there's a lot of stuff in this where it's done like it's one
continuous shot. Yeah.
How they did it, I presume that there's so much technicality in it. I doubt it kind of was. But maybe it was, I don't know, but it's just amazing. Like,
the whole point, I suppose, of Michael B. Jordan playing the two twins as well. Like,
that's
how the
fucking that was
seamless.
Like. Yeah, because you do forget.
Yeah,
like, you
absolutely.
you're looking at it and you're going, it's the same. But kind of part of me was kind of like, it's like the Usos, you know? But then you're kind of like, the Usos don't look a lot like Jimmy is taller than Jay. But it's just, now we use that reference because we're looking at an awful lot of wrestling at the moment.
Yes.
But it's just, it's fucking... It's done amazing.
It is,
like.
and that particular shot, I'm going to have to go back and watch it again as well, because it kind of reminds me, I don't know if people know of, over here it'd be popular, a comedian called Tommy Tiernan, and he does this bit where in sort of an Irish pub back in the day, you know, sort of everyone is playing their traditional music, and like it sort of it rises and rises, and people get totally into it, and then it's almost like the roof lifts off the pub and everyone is just caught up in this absolute whirlwind of like, you know, emotion and music and stuff like that. And that was the feeling that was going on there. Everyone was so caught up in the music and everyone was like moving as one, singing as one, connected as one. Yeah, you know,
it's tribalism nearly too. And like, I mean, the whole thing that they do well, it's because even at the start of it, they have the whole thing about these, I can't think of all the different names that they use, but like these musicians that have the power to bring people together, but they also kind of like draw in, and that they have the power to kind of like carry their ancestor spirits and carry on stories and stuff. They call it the feel for Irish, I think, in the thing, but like over here, say outside of music, it'd be Shanakees would be the ones that I carry.
Storytellers, basically. That's the direct translation of it.
But you know that they have this, and instantly it's the relationship between the Choctaw Indians, African Americans, and Irish with it. And the whole thing that's like culturally significant with it is that there has been like, there was like great and like there still is, say, with Ireland between like, say, Africans and like I don't like, but it just seems to be kind of one of the, I don't know, without getting too much into it. Well, I suppose we're going to be getting too into it. The whole story is like, say, with the Choctaw Indians, when the famine was happening in Ireland, they sent money over after they had experienced their own famine.
They were very, very disenfranchised as well after being, you know, sent off down the Trail of Tears and all the rest, and they still managed to gather up, I think it was $100 at the time, which was like a fortune at the time. Just
because they heard of the suffering in and like, I mean,
the thing with the English were blockading as well, any aid coming in, because it was making them look bad, but the Choctaws managed
like what's fucking happening basically in Palestine at the moment.
But and there's like sculptures in, say, Dublin City as well that are kind of like testament to that. There's like a sort of a ring of, you'll see it in a few different Irish towns actually. It's like, you know, kind of commemorating what the Choctaws did for the Irish during the famine, and how they reached out, you know, seeing a kindred spirit, I suppose, as such, you know. And
then as well, like you had like a lot of people don't really like, Irish people would have been that went over during the famine. They would have ended up being indentured slaves, which basically means they had to work their...
they basically got their passage and over to America or whatever, but then they had to work to pay off their passage. But you more or less never manage to work
No,
off entirely. So
they'd work you to death with it, but the Irish kind of figured out how to get out of it. And at the same time, like, Irish people used to live with black people, or Africans, or because it was the same. Like, I mean, we would have been sent as slaves to, say, Caribbean colonies as well.
Yeah.
So there used to be always, like, this is the whole thing. I fucking don't care what anyone says. I think most cultures are the same. People that go on with like racist fucking ideology are trying to kind of like, you know, cause it's just to try and separate us, where I think we all have way more in common than we have not in common. It's more of a class thing. It's by all these cunts that are up at the top that want to try and think that there's an actual difference there where there's not. So, like, historically, Irish and African...
there's no blacks, no dogs, no Irish, wasn't it? The Irish people were looked down on as a separate race, I suppose.
Yeah, we were looked at like we're animals. Yeah. It was like we weren't... Even, like, you look at some of the pictures from, like, English books, and it was like we weren't even human, we were, like, subhuman. Orcs are kind of based on Irish people in J.R. Tolkien's. There's no kind of, like, explicit thing with it. But it fucking kind of is, because it's this whole thing about the elves were the first and then they were perverted, and it was like basically the Irish. Yeah. He talked about how he thought that Ireland was evil, and the only thing that kind of kept us kind of like nearly human was our Catholic religion, like the religious piousness of like the Irish people,
which was another form of oppression for Irish as well,
which is covered in like mentioned briefly in Sinners with the vampire, like, you know.
But it is like, I mean, you know, sort of people talk about like the Irish caricature. I suppose it was a big thing as well. There was a lot of newspapers of the day and all the rest, English newspapers or Punch or any of those kind of things, and it was like horrific stereotypes, like the Irish being basically beasts.
Yeah, very similar drawings to the way that Africans and Jews would have been drawn, kind of like, you know, at around the same time. Where it was, but like the whole thing was, not unfortunately, there is fucking an unfortunate thing to. Irish people figured out how to get out of it. Because they were, and then they kind of got accepted as white over time, because they basically got into the police, they got into politics. There was a lot of gangster stuff.
Religion as well,
and religion and stuff. So they started taking over like New York and fucking all this, and they kind of got into it. But
they went for all the city jobs, I suppose.
But unfortunately, what happened, which I think is really shameful, because I was always aware of the relationship between Irish and African, and as well, kind of like you're kind of brought up with, like, because like in Ireland, we've talked about this before. We would have grown up when there was the famine in Ethiopia. So obviously, with our history of famine, there is a big thing. Like Bob Geldof did Live Aid and all that stuff to kind of, and like, so there was always
a lot
like
of fundraising.
Fundraising, but constantly. Like I can every year in school we were doing, and then even in secondary school,
it was like different. Sets a given, I suppose. Really, you do a sponsored fast or something like that to try and raise money. Sponsored walks, you'd have your choker box, you'd have everything.
There's always good relationships between like, and there still is great relationships between Ireland and like a lot of different African countries.
I still have a little bit of an issue with it, because it was along the lines of like there was a little bit of proselytization.
It was like you get the aid if you, like, you know, you worship our God and you do this,
Christian kind of thing, which I have an issue with.
Yeah, but still at the same point, I'm just on about the general Irish person, kind of like not the institutions with it. But what happened, unfortunately, over in America because of that thing, instead of like trying to bring up or like say kind of like African brothers and sisters, just joined the system and kind of pulled the fucking ladder up behind us. And kept people where it's like, oh, now we're part of the system, fuck you, you know.
Again, I don't know how true that is, or, you know,
it did become part of it, you know. Over in America it definitely did, but that's why like they have the Irish as a vampire. That's like what the whole thing is about, because like the Irish, and as well like the vampire, and preys on people's like empathy. And it's like all this in where it's like there's this whole thing, no Remick, where he's like, oh, we're family, oh, that, you know, that we can all be one, and it's.
Well, that's what I was going to say as well. I think maybe like there's a lot of different interpretations. This is not just me saying it because I'm Irish, but like the way I was kind of looking at it was, there is a shared culture there insofar as people who are basically oppressed. They similar enough kind of music. I suppose music is very important to the Irish. Rhythm, poetry, that kind of stuff. Same with African Americans. Same with Africa. And it was the whole thing of like, you know, once you become a vampire, you start to share memory. So there's this direct sort of correlation to sort of like your ancestral memory and all the rest. And they were saying, well, look, what better way to create our own community than we'll actually, you know, we'll all join as one, and we can win out, and we'll become more powerful. So it was almost this kind of striving towards joining the oppressed cultures together so that they could become strong and powerful and be the best that they could be kind of a thing, and fuck, sort of the Ku Klux Klan kind of a thing. So
But it's what I
that's the kind
remember.
of take
The
I
first
took
thing
from
that
it a
he
little
did
bit.
was he got 2 clan people to turn into vampires. He didn't give a shit about any of that, really. It was just, he just wanted power. It's just, he just feeds off people, and like, they could be all dead in the morning. Like, he, they're just his puppets.
Yeah.
That's all that it was. Whereas, like, he is part of it, the whole thing. And what I didn't really pick up on when we're looking at the film, there's like one of the characters in it. Like, excuse me, because like, we don't need, if you're listening to this, I presume you've seen the fucking film anyway. Like, nearly everyone's seen it. I think we were just late to the party because we were waiting for it to show up on streaming. But I can't either smoke or stack, but your woman that was the hoodoo.
Yeah.
One that, like, she was like, when I die, fucking make sure to kill me before I turn. And it was the whole thing because she had all the ancestral memories and all the stuff from, and she didn't want him to possess it. Yeah, because he'd have all her, and that's why they were like, when she got killed, they were like, no, because they're after Sammy and her. Was the thing once he picked up that she knew all that. It was like, oh, I want your knowledge. So it's like just this vampire that's going around just feeding on people. It's like, he mightn't even be Irish. Is the thing. It might have been like the person that turned him into a vampire might have been Irish. Although that there is like newspaper clippings I saw in one of the videos that come up briefly on it.
Yeah.
And they have a thing about a famine ship coming in and everyone dead on it and blood all over the place. So that's obviously his arrival in America.
Exactly, that's it. But again, like, I mean, you go through it as well. He kills the couple initially and turned them into vampires, I suppose, who are the clan members. But because of that, then he gained their knowledge of, they were due to go down the next day. This is a whole thing again as well. The brothers are after buying like this old mill of this like super racist guy, and he was planning on like taking their money.
He looked kind of like the sheriff out of Smokey and the Bandit. Was that
exactly,
typical kind of like fat kind of
thing, but he was planning on coming back the next morning and basically killing them, so he'd have their money and he'd kill these interlopers basically and have it back to good old Whitey kind of a town again. So obviously the vampire then he gained their knowledge from it was his son and the wife, and he was like, all right, okay, and that's how he came to know about the Duke and all of that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? So there was that whole thing there as well as like get there before the white man does, and I do think that I completely get and I understand this whole I want to take your knowledge and I'm selfish and all the rest. But I do think there was a little bit of a plea there as regards, like, right, all of us oppressed people band together. It was like, get there before the white man kills him. We'll turn him because we think vampirism is the best thing ever. Like, you can live forever and you can have all your friends and your family.
I suppose at the end of it thing, and the credit scenes that they show... Was it Smoke? I can't remember because, like, quite obviously both of them are Michael Jordan. And, like, we've only seen it once. I intend to look at it again, but don't want to look at it, like, the night after.
But so to the couple that basically got turned to vampirism and all the rest. And
him and his girlfriend, partner or whatever he was, when they show up
when
to Sammy's old, and, like, they seem to be on, they're very much their own... person, that they're not like the way that they were kind of portrayed nearly beforehand was that they were being controlled by Remick, because like they'd all say things at the same time and all that, where they came in and they seem to be more like, say, the typical kind of vampire that you'd think of, kind of like near free. So like they got their freedom because like there was a whole thing with that character as well, and he's got Hayley Stanfield that she was meant to be mixed race, and the whole story was that he left and he kind of wanted her to go off and marry a white man so she'd be safe, because they talk about stuff in it that you kind of obviously you forget because you weren't fucking there, like, 100 years ago, that it was like, if like a black man stood on a white man's shoe, he could get fucking lynched for it, and all this, and you kind of go, what the fuck was wrong with people? That is the thing when
people are just seen as chattel, like, and that was it, but that's, you see, that's kind of what I took from it. I know we keep harping back to it, but like at the end they were free, and they were like, that was how they got their freedom and all the rest, and I do think that was in his own twisted way. That's what your man Rennick and the rest of them were kind of looking for, is like, we want to be our own tribe, we want to be free of oppression, and no one can ever tell us what the fuck to do, and we have the rest of the time to do it.
I think there is part of that with him, but like quite obviously because he's on his own and he's been around for maybe fucking 1,200 years that he's done this a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of like, I do agree, like, I mean, that is like, you know, a possibility that he was maybe kind of thinking, oh, we can create our own kind of colony and we're all equal and stuff.
Yeah, well, that's like, I mean, obviously it's coming from a twisted place and he was trying to lure people in, but I do think there was a little seed of that there, and that's, you know, what he was using to tempt people in. That's the way I read it.
That's the thing, because they didn't really get into his motivations too much with it. So there is that thing, if you're looking at a vampire's motivations, normally is to bleed people dry, but he didn't. He's like turning people.
Yeah.
So like that's
to create another tribe.
Yeah, that was similar to what's his face in Salem's Lot, the vampire in Salem's Lot, where he was like creating the whole fucking town, turning them all into vampires. But he'd done that over, like, and it never really lasted, like, or worked out. The new version of Salem's Lot is garbage, by the way. It's good actually up until the end, isn't it? And then at the end, like, spoiler alert, they all got killed at like a drive-through, and it's like, that's like in the Salem's Lot, the original one, and even in the book, they're not dead. The vampires are all still fucking around. People like escape, flee with their, you know. But what were I saying?
But yeah, no, like, I mean, I do think at the heart of it is like, it was tribalism. Like, I mean, that's what it all, like, that's what vampire films are always about. It's like their own tribe, and people. It's dangerous because they pose a threat, like, to normal folk, shall we say? And it's like, again, they're sort of they're not day walkers, they're night walkers. They're seen as this dark, the sinister, the other, all of that kind of stuff. Whereas like normal people are like sun folks, you know, they walk in the day and they do normal folk stuff and all the rest. So I suppose there was a bit of that there with the whole the Choctaw thing as well. They were like the day walkers, the sun worshippers that were trying to turn up, and they were trying to get rid of. And like, they
fucking knew the very minute it started getting dark, they were like, we're just getting the fuck out of here. We're not going to deal with this. Like, it's one of the criticisms of the film that I would have, I think, is that when the vampire thing did happen, the soundtrack kind of went. I can understand why they did it. It went to nearly the music at the Lost Boys when like. Fucking the guy at the end, in case people haven't seen Lost Boys, is revealed, and it's that like Transylvanian Dracula.
It's that kind of I suppose they're going for unsettling, maybe. You know,
but it's like that old music. But like, I mean, I suppose that was like paying tribute to it. But because the music was so strong, it kind of nearly felt corny, I think. And like some of the scenes when the vampires were in it, I thought with the music kind of there, it felt like I might rewatch it and feel differently about it.
Well, it reminded me a little bit of it. Do you remember they tried to do the Office spin-off with Dwight's family, and it just reminded me a little bit of that. But again, I was like, well, look, it's, you know, they're leaning into like folk kind of trad
music, not on about
know?
The folk trad music. I'm on about like the actual background music. It was like Hammer horror music, or like the music that would have been in like the original Dracula was playing in the background, which I thought was a big, you know, where I thought it might have been better if they had like, say, more Delta blues music in it. But I appreciate what they were doing, but it's, and as well, I think probably because they did 5 conventions with it, I thought it was going to be nearly like say John Carpenter's Siege thing, where it's like, oh, they're all going to be saying they're all going to get picked off one by one, which kind of happens, but it doesn't. Like, loads of them go out, and kind of for a while you think maybe they got away, and then it's like, no, he somehow managed to kill and turn like fucking maybe 100 people into vampires, where, you know, I would like to see bits of that, but excuse me, but then maybe that would have slowed down the pace of the movie. And is it really essential then? It's just turned into a gore fest or a horror fest. It's not like really serving the story. I don't know. But like, there was part of me looking at it that, but like, the more I think about it, then kind of like, well, you didn't really need to. That's just your own fucking programming from looking at stuff like Dusk Till Dawn and like John Carpenter movies. The whole time
you need to see the gore. It's all about the
or you're expecting that because that's what happens in those movies, where this is a very different movie. Very, very different movie. And
I think as well, there's a lot of commentary about like people's character in it as well. There's a lot of very strong women again as well, who are kind of like going against the grain, and they were their own independent women. They didn't care what people fucking thought of them or anything like that. There's a lot of strong women that were kind of like holding the whole fort together, kind of a thing as well. You know, they were the ones that were doing everything. Like even Grace, the Chinese shopkeeper, you know, she was the one that basically went, fuck, they're not getting my daughter, they might have gotten my husband, but fuck this, like, I'm going to kill a few with me, kind of a thing. And then you had other people, like, I mean, you had Smoke and Stack, they were gangsters, they were like terrible people, you thought, because they were like, you know, ready to do violence at a whim. But they always seem to have this weird sense of morality where, like, you know, they shot the guys that were interfering
kind of
with
community.
This is it. They were
driven.
like, yeah, they shot the guys that were basically trying to rob their truck, but then they gave him money for the doctor to treat him afterwards.
And that's just because they were like, but that's probably stuff that they learned from working with Al Capone.
Possibly, but at the same point, they were like, still, Sammy was interested in doing it, and they're like, no, we had a father, our reputation was tainted, so that's all we can do. Your father's a preacher, you have a good reputation, fucking stick to your good reputation, go off and make something yourself, don't come down our
But
road.
as well, even the whole thing that they're meant to be there to make money with the juke joint that they have set up, and like I fucking didn't even realise this until looking at that, whereas like they had plantation coin, which was different from actual regular coin.
That's everywhere. Like, I mean, we're living in a small rural part of Ireland. There was a local tannery.
I know your grandfather used to get paid. It was like they were leather coins, wasn't it? Yeah.
That you could only spend. It was like it was a whole town was basically built around this industry. There was houses built for the workers. There were shops built for the workers to buy their goods and groceries in. And way back in the day, it was like leather coins were given out as payment for your work. So it was like, well, you still have to buy all your food from the factory owners, you know?
So it's just exploiting you even further, where it's like you can't, like they do, like I've heard about it in parts of Australia, Irish people coming back from Australia, and like they don't necessarily do it with different coin. But it's like, say, it might be credits even. Yeah. So what you have is some of these mines that they have like towns built, but they're not even towns. Yeah, they're like services for the miners. But it's all pubs. So basically what happens is you're coming out of the mine and you're fucking... It's like what happened to like the Irish over in... I'm sure it's happened with fucking everyone, like every race at different points, but like what we know of the Irish over in England. Where they went, like the Irish built fucking like a lot of the roads over in England, did a lot of the infrastructure over there.
A lot of construction in general,
But it was set up that like they get their money and then they go to the pub. So you had this whole thing of like, it's still like over there, these older people that they're homeless because they were ashamed to look for help to come home because they're meant to be making so much money abroad and doing well. But they basically just turned into alcoholics because they were getting, you know, that's...
There's nothing else, they missed home and they couldn't come back, and they said, well, drown your sorrows with drink.
So they ended up, like, say, homeless or, like, destitute over, like, so it was this whole thing as well about, like, the promise of, was it Dick Whittington? Or fucking with the cat, where it's like the streets of London are paved with gold. And it's like they're not. This is the lie. Like they even talk about, like with Chicago, it's like most cities. Like for after industrialization occurred, it was this whole thing was being sold to people in rural areas where it was like move to the cities, make your fortune, and it still happens. It, like you have a lot of people that are like, oh well, I have to move to Dublin. Like
it works like for a lot of people. Like I mean, likely on your side of the family as well. But I've had like grandparents that they had to go to England to make money. My grandmother emigrated to America when she was
they have
younger.
to. But it doesn't lead to a better life because you're being exploited there. So it's like even say with Dublin or London, these big cities where they try and say to people, you have to move there to work, which you fucking end up having to do, but you end up having a worse life because things are more expensive.
Yeah.
Your rent is triple or quadruple.
Travel
so you might be getting more money, but you can end up like we went over abroad and we were working, and like you end up working but not really having any spare money at the end of it, you know.
Life, but that's again, it's down to the individual, different people. Like I mean, there was the whole thing I suppose years ago. Somebody had emigrated to America and send money back home to pay for the next person to come over. So there was a lot of if you. I suppose if you were one of the lucky ones, you did manage to kind of like
carve
pull
out
yourself up a little bit. You send the money back home to the family, and then you retire back home and you build your house. Then out
that's the thing. The opportunity was there, but it wasn't there for everyone.
Yeah.
So it was like you were still being exploited along the way. But then some of the people they kind of and this is like what I was saying about like with the Irish over like in America. What happened is they got to a certain position and then they pulled the fucking ladder up. Yeah, we're seeing that even happening in Ireland at the moment.
Oh yeah.
Well, like it happens everywhere. You get people, they get like a bit of money and then they're like, well, fuck ye. And it's like Irish people have famously been all over the world, emigrated all around the world. And it's...
You're seeing a bit of it now with the far right. They're like, oh, we don't want immigrants
coming in. And Ireland has always been fairly welcome. And like, I mean, one of the things that I think is really good about Ireland, where we've seen it in other countries where it's like, they seem to like get into power and they're in Ireland people are very much kind of like, no, you're fucking idiots. You're not like the anti-immigrant crowd.
They are being scoffed at, and it's a very small but vocal minority. That's the trouble. It sounds like it's a lot more than it is, but there's a lot of And in fairness, people are turning out counter protests and all this.
Yeah.
But no immigrants welcome
Sure, like
and all the
where
rest,
we're from, like there was a while ago there was a protest. We saw the pictures of it, and it was like 4 people. The anti-immigration people were like there was like 4 of them standing
for their
around,
protest, yeah.
and there was like fucking hundreds of other people that were like anti that were like pro-immigration, because it is like immigration. Like it's another fucking conversation, but it helps countries. It doesn't.
Yeah.
There's never been a thing where it's always just you have certain people will try and sell it as these immigrants bringing crime in and their religion
our culture and blah blah blah. Yeah,
and it's like bollocks.
Yeah, but if our culture is good enough, like it'll survive. If it's like, again, that's the point. Irish culture was nearly quenched by the English trying to stamp it out and not just, I don't mean recent times, but like traditionally, colonially, sort of. It was, you couldn't speak Irish, you couldn't learn Irish, and so you weren't supposed to be educated, you couldn't own land, you could do nothing like it. Do you know what I mean? It was trying to stamp the culture out, but it was strong enough that it thrived. We've got this, sort of the GAA and the sports and all the rest. People just rallied against it.
But there were a lot of people that would have went like, well, it's easier to side with the English. Yeah. I'm going to fucking learn, and take what they used to say was like taking the Queen's fucking penny or the Queen's fucking pound or whatever it was. And that where it's kind of like keeping people down, and you have that happens with every kind
I
of
know,
thing.
but
I think
the
where
point
people
I'm
are
making that it's all sort of the far right are like, it'll ruin our culture. If your culture is strong enough, and if you want it to survive, it will survive.
You take things in, you learn from others.
Even with the oppression is what I'm saying. That say a load of like Indians, the Welsh, everyone kind of went through it, where it's like their culture was basically don't want your language, don't want your traditions, don't want your your superstitions or anything like that. They're strong enough to go, no, do you know what, fuck off. So if you are not being oppressed and your culture doesn't survive, something wrong with your culture. You're not a strong person, you're not a strong... Do you know what I mean? That's the point I'm trying to make.
Well, one of the things that's...
They're weak to be worried about.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, Jesus, yeah, they are, like, fucking all those morons. Like, I'm like, one of the lovely things, I think, like, because we were living over in England for, like, nearly a decade, and, like, before we went off, there would have been... a lot of refugees coming into Ireland. It was like when the time when Ireland started doing well and kind of opened up.
Yeah. Opportunities, I suppose, for people to come.
We came back to, say, maybe second generation of people that would have came into Ireland, maybe third generation even. And it's just really nice to see like the different colours around. That it's not just all white, but as well
it's not
that
homogenous anymore.
It seems to have happened quite naturally,
very easily, I think people have integrated very easily.
Yeah, that's the word with the integration. But like so there must be a lovely mixture in some houses of like different stories, folklore and stuff, like mixture of African and Irish folklore, and people. I don't know. I'd hope they were teaching them more in schools, but where it's like that you do learn about like. I hate using the term just African because like Africa is fucking
a load of different countries within one continent.
And I know they're like a lot of different, but like I mean in Ireland it would have been I suppose more is it West Coast where Nigeria is and one thing East. I suppose it's all over Africa with people coming. But just all those different kind of like tales, that different thing kind of blending in with Irish culture and stuff. And like you see, there's a lot of Irish rap now, and that's not like people fucking appropriating or stuff. It's like there's a lot of say, I don't even like. I don't want to call them Irish African because they're Irish. If you're in Ireland, you're Irish unless you want to be kind of like kind of. But like that blend. Of people that oh god, but there's like there is like that second generation African Irish people that are like rapping and doing stuff, and they're after kind of creating their own style of rap and their own style of music. So it's what you have is like say this nice meld going on at the moment, and there's like it's adding to the culture. Is what I'm trying to say in a kind of a way of trying to be like that old person trying to be careful about using the right words and kind of just making it sound worse.
Absolutely, that's it. But back to Sinners. Yeah, because it sounds like we're trying to drag it over to be about Ireland and
but it's not. But it's like it's one of the things I do love about it. Like when you get it every now and again where you look at a movie and you do go looking up kind of stuff. Like there is like I'm very interested in African American history. Like I love hip hop. That sounded really kind of like, hey, I like your
Yeah,
I like your
wearing
hippity
my,
hop.
my baseball cap backwards.
But I grew up with hip hop. I've always like I love black metal, and I love fucking kind of like death metal and stuff, and industrial metal. But I love hip hop. I just like a mixture of music. But so looking at documentaries about hip hop, and you kind of learn a little bit about black history. With it, but like, so looking at something like this, you kind of go, I want to learn more, and you go off and you look, and then you kind of, it's all so depressing. Where you kind of go,
It comes about because of like, having no money and severe poverty and still being oppressed and all the rest, and that's how
it's just it's like looking at it, as great as Sinners is, when you do look into the history of it. It's just the poor African American that had to put up and still had to. It's just fucking horrific.
It's people have still not caught pace, I suppose, with where they should be in life and all the rest. But again, it's, I suppose, if you're sort of a very glass half empty type person, whereas I'd be kind of like glass half full insofar as like, yes, absolutely horrendous fucking suffering and all the rest, but the positivity and the indomitability of the human spirit fuck yeah, I don't care if I'm enslaved, I'm still gonna fucking make music.
It goes to show how strong as like, say, a race or people, or that like African Americans are, that despite like all these systems, and I don't understand why they want to fucking like say as a system, because part of me used to think that's all conspiracy theory bullshit. People can't be that evil or that kind of nearly part, because I don't think a lot of humanity anyway, I kind of thought that they couldn't be that organised to kind of like keep a whole people. And like, I mean, what's the benefit of it? And then when you kind of read about it, you kind of go, Jesus Christ. Even like just before we started doing the podcast, the whole thing about like, we're talking about the significance of the Chinese store owners in Sinners, and like the historical kind of thing of it at the time, that it was like basically another way of exploiting
black communities. Basically, it was extracting the
body out of where you got to go, oh my.
Not by the Chinese mind. It was
not by Chinese, but like
white-owned land and white-owned stores, white-owned goods that were like, right, they saw the Chinese as a step above.
But they didn't want the Chinese coming into white neighbourhoods, so they'd say, we'll give you a loan to open up a store in this black neighbourhood, and have like horrendous interest rates on it. So they're just taking them on. And you kind of go, fucking...
but sure, it's still like, I mean, it still is a thing in America. You look at like, say, prison statistics and all the rest of it. And it is, again, it's like this form of like state-sponsored slavery now. It's kind of like, right, we'll pivot, we'll do it another way, we'll just criminalise everything, and we'll have people then in jail for fucking ridiculous things. Like, I mean, cannabis has been decriminalised in so many states.
Sure, wasn't that the whole...
And yet there's people are still in jail for...
Wasn't that the whole thing after, like, that, like, not open... We saw it was like, the 52nd of it, or I can't remember what it was. Like, there was a documentary on Netflix ages ago, where it was about, like, the abolition of slavery over there, and then when, like, there was, like, because there were people getting fucking locked up, like, they came up with these laws where it was... you could do someone for loitering, so if it's like someone just standing outside a shop, it's like, alright, you're going in, so you're basically a slave again, but you're locked up in a fucking place.
That's it, and that's still you're productive in a prison, like, because they're selling your labour there. And it was about criminalising things. It was like, right, okay, crack, it was seen as, sort of a black drug, so as we'll criminalise crack cocaine.
The white businessman gets caught with it, they're like, oh,
it's fine, no, it's a different type of cocaine, so it's not as serious, like, but all these systems are still in place.
It's just fucking horrific, like, it is fucking absolutely horrific. With it, and it's just the thing, I suppose, coming from our generation as well, because there's a lot of, like, we're Generation X, I suppose, we're millennials, where there was a lot of hope.
That's the thing that baffles us, is like in the 90s it was like, obviously, I don't know, fucking were we just naive kids, but it did seem like the world was going that way. The Berlin Wall was coming down, and Nelson Mandela,
there was like relationships were good with Russia, there was like all this stuff was trying to build up, there was like civil rights movement seemed to be back where things were going the right way, there was gay rights
and everything was going positive. Humanity were starting to get along, and everyone was like, we're moving forward, and now it just seems to be rolling like fucking decades, centuries back in
it's attitude. Fucking like there's probably a load of real, but it's like all these, not all, but there was like a generation above that, it was the same thing, they pulled up the ladder, because our generation, as hopeful as we were, there was fuck all for us, and we were kind of forgotten about. There was no jobs.
there was just fucking financial crisis after financial
crisis, which organs.
No
so,
houses, there's no nothing, no availability.
Even still nowadays, our generation aren't really in the position of power to kind of like do anything or to kind of bring anything in. Then the ones that are, like say JD Vance is probably a little bit older than us, say using that kind of cunt as a fucking and then. But look, it's just these people that they join the system instead of kind of going, how can we make things better for everyone else?
Things,
It's like no, we're going to
how
fucking...
can I fix it for me?
Yeah, I want money, I want this and I want that, and I don't care. No one else is going to get it. So we'll keep all these divisions in place and we'll hurt it. Like, what's going on with ICE over there? I've only seen this morning about fucking in LA. And they're like... It's like I've seen it happen over that, but like the big thing at the moment is like there was nearly riots over in LA,
it's just
which there should be like
people and deportation of people who are legally there, people who have been born in America, and they're just like, oh well, you look slightly different, so fuck it, we're throwing you in and just throwing you over a border.
Fucking like be up in arms over there. Like it's the thing that I think is the detriment to people is like to say people that are left wing lean, they're like, well, we don't want to go to it. War is a bad thing and this, whereas like the cunts on the right are like, no, we'll use guns, we'll fucking do this and we'll do that and we'll do that. And they're the minority. It's
a military state, a fascist military state at the moment.
It's like rise up and fucking put bullets in these cunts' heads, with it.
You've gone a little bit off down. Yes. There, haven't you?
Yes. But yes, Sinners. Great film. Yes. I'd love to see a sequel or a prequel to it. I doubt we'll get it because it kind of does stand on its own, and the Ryan Coogler, I can't pronounce his name, sorry, I'm fucking but he seems like the kind of guy that would be like, no, this
one
is
and done. You don't necessarily want to. You could have spin-offs within the same universe that are tackling different things and all the rest. But you don't really want to have another. Let's open a slightly different juke joint and let's have slightly different vampires coming.
It kind of takes away from the mythology of it though as well, doesn't it? Where it's like, I think part of the fun of it is like nearly going off looking up the stuff about it, or people coming up with things. Oh, he did Creed as well. I really like Creed. It was like the reboot of, well, not the reboot, it was like the Apollo Creed son from Rocky, and Michael B. Jordan was in it. Michael B. Jordan was in Black Panther as well, which I really liked. I didn't see Wakanda Forever because it kind of went out of the whole Marvel thing at that stage, but I think for someone to come from those big budget movies, to kind of like come
and
up
to do something that's so artistically fucking new and fresh and unusual as well. Normally you come from the big systems, you're like, oh, let's just have crash bang explosions and fireworks and let's
that's what I mean.
It's so nuanced and like,
well, Black Panther was really really different as well, and like, fair play to him as I would imagine it was him that was like when Chitwell the guy that was playing when he died, that he was probably like, we're not like recasting, like,
he can't. It was his role, and that was
with it. And like, I can imagine that would probably impact on that film as kind of like the sequel to it. But like the first Black Panther, there was some mad. It was like, for a Marvel movie, there was a lot of like visual kind of thing that really made it stand out from the rest of it. Like, there was a reason why it's probably still one of the most successful Marvel movies behind fucking the Avengers stuff, Endgame and all that.
Yes.
But yeah, I suppose there's not really much else to say.
Well, there's loads you could say, but like there's we could be here like fucking 20 hours later dissecting everything and still be wrong about it all. Well, I suppose that's a point where we just wind things up. Exactly, and go off and throw on some Me in the Blue.
Actually, before the soundtrack is amazing too. The soundtrack is really, really, really good. And the guy that plays Sammy, and that's like, I think his first movie. And
my God, if that's actually him singing and playing, holy shit!
Yeah, I think it is.
God. Like, fantastic.
It's like fucking what a debut! Like, I'm really looking forward to seeing what other movies he does. I think he's probably like this generation's maybe Martin Scorsese. That's what I was going to say there before. I kind of forgot about it, but like, he's. I think. He's where it's like Scorsese seemed to come from like really independent background, and kind of like, I don't know, maybe he did it as well. I'd imagine he did, but to have like first film is going to be Marvel films.
Yes. But in case you didn't get it, we really enjoyed Sinners, and you should go and see it. Everyone should see this film. Yeah,
actually, before we go, one thing I will say, when I went on to the user reviews, and like the first user reviews on IMDb, I think it's got like, this is what makes me kind of go, well, maybe Rotten Tomatoes is more fucking kind of accurate. Rotten Tomatoes, I think it's like 9.7 or something like that. on fucking IMDb it's 7.9, and you got like a lot of kind of like, oh, reviews are bought, overhyped for sure. And now I'm convinced, oh yeah, stylish, preachy, and overrated. It'll be this like anti-woke crowd
Oh, of course it is. Yeah.
going in trying to sink the movie just for
Because,
whatever, like, you know, fucking hateful reason, like. So yeah, it's like, don't listen to, like, I'm sure it's going to see the score of it coming down over time. Don't. It's truly an amazing film. I think it'll be one of those films that will be held up very
It'll be
highly.
studied in film schools.
That's it. Yeah, for years to come. Like, it's an addition, and it's great, is because there's not many fucking.
Yeah, there's nothing new and fresh or exciting or innovative or artistic or anything like that out there.
It is like. And it seemed to come out of nowhere as well, which is brilliant. But yeah, look, thanks for listening. We'll hopefully be back more regularly with the schedule. So yeah, subscribe and all that stuff. Bye.